The morning sun cast rainbow patterns through Dr. Silthera's crystalline wings as she stood on the observation deck of the Grand Spire. Below her, the capital city of Lumineth stretched across the valley like a garden of living glass. The Villani had built their homes from the same crystal that formed their bodies, creating structures that sang in harmony with the wind. But today, the songs were wrong. Fear had crept into the melodies, turning beautiful music into discordant warnings. Silthera pressed her delicate hand against the viewing panel and felt the vibrations of panic spreading through her people. "The reports are confirmed," said Veltar, her assistant, his voice barely a whisper through their telepathic link. "The Korath swarm has consumed 3 more worlds in the Zeta sector. They will reach us in 6 cycles." Silthera closed her large, multifaceted eyes. The Korath were a nightmare made real. Where other species built and created, the swarm only consumed. They stripped planets bare, turning entire worlds into empty husks. Worse, they absorbed the knowledge and memories of every species they devoured, growing stronger with each conquest. "How many ships do they have now?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Intelligence estimates over 800 bioships, each one the size of our largest city." Veltar's mental voice trembled. "Our defense fleet has 12 vessels. They are beautiful, but they were designed for exploration, not war." The Villani had never needed weapons. For 10,000 years they had lived in perfect harmony. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to share thoughts and emotions directly, making conflict impossible. They had no concept of violence, no understanding of warfare. Their ships could travel between stars, but they carried scientists and artists, not soldiers. Silthera spread her wings and glided down to the communication center. The massive chamber hummed with activity as hundreds of Villani worked to coordinate the evacuation efforts. Their crystalline forms moved with desperate efficiency, but she could feel their terror through the psychic network that connected all her people. "We need help," she announced to the room. Every head turned toward her, hope flickering in their compound eyes. "I will send a request to the Galactic Aid Network." The network was their only chance. Established 50 years ago, it was a coalition of advanced civilizations dedicated to helping species in crisis. The Villani had joined 3 years earlier, contributing their knowledge of crystal technology and psychic research. Now it was time to ask for help in return. Silthera approached the quantum communication array. The device was a marvel of network technology, capable of sending messages across the galaxy in minutes instead of years. She placed her hands on the control crystals and began composing her plea. "To the Galactic Aid Network Emergency Council," she began, her thoughts flowing into the transmission matrix. "I am Dr. Silthera of the Villani Harmony, speaking for 2.3 billion souls facing extinction. The Korath swarm approaches our world with overwhelming force. We have no weapons, no military knowledge, no way to defend ourselves." She paused, feeling the weight of her people's lives in her words. "We request immediate assistance for full planetary evacuation. We need gentle peacekeepers who can help us move our population to safety before the swarm arrives. Time is critical. We have 6 standard cycles before they reach our system." The message included technical details about their world, population centers, and transportation capabilities. Silthera emphasized their peaceful nature and complete lack of military resources. Any species responding would need to understand they were helping refugees, not soldiers. "Please," she concluded, "we offer no resistance to anyone who comes in peace. We only ask for help to preserve our people and our culture. The universe will be darker if the songs of the Villani fall silent forever." She released the message into the quantum stream and watched the status indicators confirm transmission. The signal would reach Proxima Station, the network's central hub, within the hour. From there, it would be distributed to member species based on their capabilities and availability. The waiting began. Hours passed with no response. Silthera tried to project calm through the psychic network, but her people could sense her growing anxiety. Evacuation preparations continued, but they were moving too slowly. The Villani had never faced a crisis like this. They had no protocols for planetary abandonment, no experience with refugee logistics. "Dr. Silthera," called Mordon from the sensor station, "we're detecting movement in the outer system. 3 ships, unknown configuration. Scouts?" she asked, her heart sinking. If the Korath had sent advance units, they were already too late. "Negative. The energy signatures are wrong. These vessels appear to be investigating our outer defense platforms. Strange. The The Korath never investigated anything. They simply consumed whatever they found. Silthera hurried to the sensor display and studied the readings. The ships were too small to be Korath bioships, but their technology was unfamiliar. "They're hailing us," reported the communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing 3 beings that made Silthera gasp. They were clearly intelligent, but unlike any species she had ever seen. They stood upright on 2 legs, had bilateral symmetry, and possessed what appeared to be external calcium structures, teeth that they bared in what might have been an expression of pleasure or aggression. "Greetings," said the central figure in accented but clear galactic standard. "I am Captain Torres of the survey vessel Magellan. We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible." Silthera felt a wave of relief wash through the psychic network. "Thank you for responding, Captain. Are you from the Galactic Aid Network?" "In a manner of speaking," Torres replied, his expression becoming more serious. "We're an independent survey team, but we have protocols for assisting species in distress. We understand you're facing an invasion?" "The Korath swarm," Silthera explained. "They will be here in 6 cycles. We need help evacuating our people." Torres exchanged glances with his companions. "We've heard of the Korath. Nasty business. Our ships aren't equipped for large-scale evacuation, but we can help coordinate rescue efforts. We've already sent word to our government about your situation." "Your government?" "The Terran Federation. We're humans from a world called Earth. Our people have some experience with evacuation operations." Torres smiled again, and Silthera tried not to think about those prominent teeth. "Help is coming. Just hold on a little longer." The transmission ended, leaving Silthera with mixed feelings. These humans seemed friendly enough, but something about them felt different from other network species. There was an intensity in their eyes, a controlled energy that reminded her uncomfortably of predator species she had studied. But they had promised help, and that was more than anyone else had offered. At Proxima Station, Administrator Zexlon reviewed the day's emergency requests with growing frustration. The translation computers had been glitching all week, corrupting dozens of aid requests. The Villani message had been particularly garbled, with key phrases completely scrambled. Instead of gentle peacekeepers for evacuation, the request had been automatically classified as extreme threat response and routed to the network's newest and most mysterious member species. Zexlon made a note to have the translation matrix debugged as soon as possible. Meanwhile, somewhere in the vast distance of space, Admiral Sarah Chen read the corrupted message on her command screen and smiled grimly. An extinction-level threat requiring immediate military intervention. This was exactly the kind of mission the Terran Federation had been waiting for. "Prep Task Force Cerberus," she ordered. "Maximum deployment. We're going to war." Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the massive holographic display in Luna Command's war room, studying the tactical projection of the Kepler system. Red markers indicated Korath fleet positions, while blue dots showed the estimated locations of Villani population centers. The numbers were staggering. 2.3 billion civilians facing extinction. "What do we know about this Korath swarm?" asked Colonel Marcus Rodriguez, commander of the 1st Terran Shock Battalion. His scarred face showed the experience of 20 years fighting humanity's wars across 3 star systems. "Bad news, Marcus," Chen replied, manipulating the hologram to show recorded footage from previous Korath attacks. "They're a hive mind species that consumes entire planets. Think of locusts, but each one is the size of a city and equipped with biotechnology that adapts to whatever they encounter." The footage showed Korath bioships descending on a world like living storms. Within hours, the planet's surface was stripped bare, leaving only dead rock behind. Every trace of civilization, every living creature, every molecule of organic matter, all consumed and incorporated into the growing swarm. "How many ships are we facing?" Rodriguez asked. "Intelligence estimates 800 plus. Each bioship is roughly equivalent to a heavy cruiser in terms of mass, but they're completely organic. No metal, no conventional technology. They grow their weapons, breed their fighters, and heal damage like living tissue." Chen brought up another display showing the human response fleet. "We're sending everything we can spare. 3 assault carriers, 12 destroyers, and 47 support vessels. That's our entire rapid response fleet. And ground forces? 5,000 of our best. The 1st Shock Battalion, 3rd Marine Division, and the 7th Ranger Regiment. Plus full support units, medics, engineers, logistics." Chen's expression hardened. This is our first major operation as part of the Galactic Aid Network. We need to prove that humanity can handle the big threats." Rodriguez nodded grimly. The Terran Federation had only made contact with galactic civilization 6 months ago. Most species still saw humans as newcomers, barely worth notice. This was their chance to show what Earth's children could accomplish when they put their minds to it. "What about the civilians we're protecting?" asked Major Kim Santos, Rodriguez's second-in-command. "What are these Villani like?" Chen pulled up the cultural briefing files. "Peaceful to the extreme. They're a telepathic species that's never developed weapons beyond farming tools. They communicate through shared thoughts and emotions, which makes conflict virtually impossible for them. Think of them as living crystals with butterfly wings." "Crystal butterflies?" Rodriguez frowned. "How the hell do they build spaceships?" "Very carefully, apparently. Their technology is all based on harmonic resonance and psychic manipulation. They grow their cities the same way we might grow plants, except theirs are made of living crystal." Chen swiped to show images of Villani architecture. Beautiful but completely defenseless. Santos studied the pictures of delicate spires and flowing organic shapes. "These people have never seen war, have they?" "Not in 10,000 years of recorded history. Which means they're going to be terrified when we show up in full combat gear." Chen activated the communication array. "All unit commanders report to Briefing Room Alpha. We need to discuss civilian protection protocols." An hour later, the briefing room was packed with humanity's most experienced combat officers. These were veterans of the Martian Rebellion, the Europa Ice Wars, and the brutal campaigns to secure the outer colonies. They had seen every kind of warfare humanity could devise. "Listen up," Chen began. "This is unlike anything we've done before. We're not fighting other humans. We're not conquering territory. We're protecting 2.3 billion civilians who have never seen violence in their entire species' history." She activated the tactical display. "Our primary objective is evacuation. The Korath will consume the planet regardless of what we do. So our job is to get as many Villani off-world as possible before that happens. Secondary objective is to delay the swarm long enough to complete the evacuation." "What's our timeline?" asked Commander Helen Park of the carrier Yorktown. 6 standard days from arrival to projected Korath contact. The Villani have been working on evacuation preparations, but they're not equipped for large-scale refugee operations. We'll need to coordinate closely with their local authorities." Rodriguez raised his hand. "Rules of engagement? Protect the civilians at all costs. The Korath show no mercy and take no prisoners. They'll consume every living thing they encounter, so consider any bioship to be an immediate threat to civilian populations. Use whatever force is necessary to keep them away from the refugee convoys." "What about the Villani themselves?" asked Major Santos. "How do we coordinate with a telepathic species?" Chen pulled up the xenobiology reports. "Their telepathy has limits. They can only communicate with other Villani, and physical contact greatly enhances the connection. However, they do have universal translators and standard communication equipment. Just remember, they've never seen soldiers before. Try not to terrorize the people we're supposed to save." The officers laughed grimly. Humans in full combat gear were intimidating even to other human populations. To a species that had never known violence, they would probably look like walking nightmares. "Equipment loadout?" asked Captain Torres, who commanded the Marine Assault Companies. "Standard peacekeeping configuration," Rodriguez answered. "Powered armor, plasma rifles, non-lethal crowd control devices, and emergency medical supplies. Each squad gets a full xenobiology kit and cultural sensitivity briefing. And remember, these people are crystalline. Our standard medical procedures might not work on them." Chen nodded approvingly. "The Villani are sending us detailed biological and cultural information, but expect the unexpected. This is first contact with a completely pacifist species. Everything they know about us comes from our aid request response." "What did we tell them?" Santos asked. "That we're experienced with evacuation operations and we're coming to help." Chen's expression darkened slightly. "I may have emphasized our military capabilities a bit more than necessary. I wanted them to know we could handle the Korath threat." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans talking about their military capabilities could sound very different to a species that had no concept of warfare. "Sir," Rodriguez said carefully, "how exactly did you phrase that message?" Chen brought up the communication logs. "I told them we were deploying our rapid response fleet with full combat capability, that we had extensive experience with hostile evacuations, and that we would neutralize any threats to civilian populations. More silence. Finally, Commander Park spoke up. Admiral, to a peaceful species that might sound less like rescue and more like invasion, Rodriguez finished. Shit. They're going to think we're coming to conquer them. Chen stared at the message logs, realizing her mistake. Military terminology that sounded reassuring. To human ears might be terrifying to beings who had never heard. Words like combat capability or neutralize threats used in actual context, too. Late to change it now, she decided. We'll just have to prove our intentions through actions. Deploy as planned, but be extra careful with first contact protocols. The last thing we need is to start a panic among the people we're trying to save. As the briefing broke up and officers returned to their commands, Rodriguez lingered behind. Sarah, he said quietly, what if they refuse our help? What if they're so scared of us that they won't let us evacuate them? Chen stared at the tactical display, watching the red markers of the approaching Korath fleet. Then 2.3 billion people die because we couldn't convince them we were the good guys. No pressure, Marcus. Rodriguez grinned without humor. Hell, Admiral, when has anything ever been easy for us? Across the solar system, cargo ships were already loading supplies for the humanitarian mission. Medical equipment designed for xenobiological emergencies, prefabricated refugee shelters, food processors capable of synthesizing nutrition for crystal-based life forms. Everything humanity could think of to help a species unlike any they had ever encountered. But locked in the armories of the assault carriers, weapons waited in darkness. Plasma cannons, nuclear torpedoes, and kinetic bombardment systems, tools of war that humanity had perfected through centuries of conflict. The Korath would learn why predators from a death world made the most dangerous protectors in the galaxy. The fleet began moving toward the jump points, carrying humanity's hopes and humanity's fury toward a distant star, where crystal butterflies sang songs of approaching doom. The human fleet materialized at the edge of the Kepler system like harbingers of war. 3 massive assault carriers led the formation, their hulls bristling with weapon emplacements and launch bays. Destroyer escorts flanked them in perfect military formation, their sensors sweeping space for threats. Behind them came supply ships, hospital vessels, and transport craft, everything needed for a large-scale military operation. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Endeavour, watching the tactical displays light up with contact information. The system was exactly as described, a single inhabited world orbiting a stable star, with scattered defense platforms that registered as barely functional by human military standards. Admiral, reported Commander Singh from the sensor station, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet. Multiple cities with populations in the millions, also picking up what appears to be a small defense fleet, 12 vessels total. Defensive capabilities? Minimal. Their ships appear to be scientific vessels with basic shielding. No weapon signatures we can identify. Chen nodded grimly. Against the Korath swarm, those ships would last about as long as paper boats in a hurricane. Open a channel to the planet. Let's announce our arrival. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Dr. Silthera felt the psychic network explode with panic as the human fleet appeared on long-range sensors. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Villani database, massive, aggressive, and obviously military in nature. How many ships? She asked Veltar, her voice tight with controlled fear. 63 vessels, he replied, his mental voice trembling. Admiral, these aren't rescue ships. These are warships. The largest ones are producing energy signatures comparable to our entire planetary grid. Silthera studied the tactical display with growing horror. The human formation was textbook military deployment, protective screens overlapping fields of fire and ready reserves. These beings weren't coming to evacuate refugees. They were coming to wage war. They're hailing us, reported the communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human female in military uniform. Her bearing was confident, professional, and utterly terrifying to a species that had never seen a soldier. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Fleet, the human announced. We received your distress call and are here to provide assistance. Please identify yourself and prepare to receive our operations team. Silthera stepped forward, trying to project calm despite the fear coursing through the psychic network. Admiral Chen, I am Dr. Silthara, diplomatic representative of the Villani Harmony. We are grateful for your response, but we were expecting evacuation assistance, not a military deployment, Chen finished. Doctor, we're here to protect your people from the Korath swarm. That requires significant firepower. We're prepared to begin evacuation operations immediately. Evacuation operations? Silthara struggled with the translation. The human was using military terminology that made everything sound like a combat mission. Admiral, we are a peaceful people. We have no weapons, no soldiers, no understanding of warfare. We simply need help moving our population to safety. Understood, Doctor. That's exactly why we're here. We'll establish secure evacuation zones and protect your transport ships during the refugee convoy operations. My ground forces are already preparing to deploy. Silthara felt the blood drain from her crystalline features. Ground forces? 5,000 of our best troops, fully equipped for hostile evacuation scenarios. They'll coordinate with your local authorities to ensure efficient civilian processing and protection. The transmission cut to static, leaving Silthara staring at a blank screen. Around her, the communication center erupted in panicked telepathic chatter as her people tried to process what they had just heard. Troops, whispered Morden. They're sending soldiers. Armed soldiers. To our cities. This is wrong, Veltar said, his mental voice edged with hysteria. We asked for help, not invasion. These humans are worse than the Korath. Silthara raised her hands for silence. We don't know their intentions yet. Perhaps this is simply how their species conducts rescue operations. But even as she spoke, she felt doubt gnawing at her mind. The human fleet was positioned for orbital bombardment. Their evacuation ships looked more like troop transports, and their admiral had spoken of securing zones and processing civilians, language that sounded ominously like military occupation. In orbit, Admiral Chen was having her own doubts. The Villani response had been nervous, almost frightened. She pulled up the cultural briefings again, trying to understand where the communication had gone wrong. Admiral, called Major Santos from the Marine Command Center, we're ready to begin deployment. First wave dropships are loaded and standing by. Chen hesitated. Something in Dr. Silthara's voice had suggested fear rather than gratitude. Major, remind your troops about civilian sensitivity protocols. These people have never seen soldiers before. We need to be gentle. Understood, Admiral. We'll follow standard peacekeeping procedures. But even as Santos acknowledged the order, Chen realized the problem. Human peacekeeping procedures involved armed soldiers establishing perimeters, controlling civilian movement, and maintaining order through overwhelming force. To a species that had never known violence, it would look exactly like invasion. The first wave of dropships launched from the carriers, carrying 300 Marines toward the planet's surface. Each soldier was equipped with powered armor, plasma rifles, and enough firepower to level a city block. They were humanity's finest, disciplined, professional, and utterly terrifying to anyone who had never seen a warrior. Colonel Rodriguez led the deployment from his command dropship, studying aerial reconnaissance of the Villani capital. The city was beautiful but completely indefensible. Open plazas, delicate structures, and no defensive positions whatsoever. Remember, he announced over the battalion network, these people are friendlies. No aggressive actions, no weapons displays unless absolutely necessary. We're here to help them, not scare them to death. His soldiers acknowledged the orders, but Rodriguez knew the problem. Humans in full combat gear looked like death incarnate. Their armor was designed to intimidate enemies and protect the wearer from hostile environments. To beings of crystal and light who had never seen warfare, they would appear to be mechanical demons. The dropships descended through the atmosphere like falling meteors, their engines carving bright trails across the alien sky. Villani throughout the capital city stopped what they were doing to stare upward, their telepathic network buzzing with terror. Dr. Silthara watched from the Grand Spire as the first human soldiers emerged from their landing craft. Even from a distance, she could see they were heavily armed and armored, moving with the precise coordination of a military unit. They immediately began establishing what appeared to be a defensive perimeter around their landing zone. They're securing territory, Veltar observed with growing panic. Look at their movements, textbook occupation tactics. Silthara had to admit he was right. The humans were deploying exactly like an invasion force, taking control of strategic positions and setting up what looked like weapon emplacements. Their soldiers moved in formation, covering each other's movements and maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Within minutes, crowds of Villani began fleeing from the human positions. The sight of armored figures triggered an instinctive fear response that no amount of rational thought could overcome. Parents grabbed their children and ran. Shopkeepers abandoned their stalls. Traffic in the sky lanes ground to a halt as civilian aircraft fled in random directions. Colonel Rodriguez watched the civilian panic with growing alarm. His sensors showed thousands of Villani retreating from his positions, many abandoning vehicles and belongings in their haste to escape. Control. This is Ground Leader, he radioed to Admiral Chen. We have a situation. Civilian population is fleeing our positions. I repeat, the locals are running away from us. Can you establish communication with local authorities? Trying, sir, but they're not responding to our hails. It looks like they're coordinating some kind of mass evacuation away from us. On the orbital command ship, Admiral Chen stared at the tactical displays in growing horror. Instead of cooperating with the human evacuation efforts, the Villani were conducting their own evacuation, fleeing from the very people who had come to save them. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Human soldiers, trained to maintain order and protect civilians, began implementing crowd control protocols when they encountered panicked Villani mobs. Sonic barriers designed to prevent stampedes only convinced the fleeing aliens that they were under attack. Non-lethal suppression fields meant to calm crowds had the opposite effect on beings who had never encountered any kind of force field. Technology Dr. Silthera received frantic telepathic reports from across the city. Human soldiers were attacking civilians with unknown weapons. They had occupied major transportation hubs and were controlling access to evacuation routes. Every standard military procedure looked like an act of aggression to people who had no context for understanding organized violence. Admiral, she called desperately over the communication channel, please call back your soldiers. Our people are terrified. They think you're here to harm us. The long-range sensors screamed their warning across every communication channel in the system. Admiral Chen stared at the tactical display as hundreds of red contacts materialized at the edge of sensor range, moving toward Kepler 442b at impossible speed. Contact analysis, she barked. 217 Korath bioships confirmed, reported Commander Singh. Mass profile suggests they're full-sized assault forms. Estimated time to planetary orbit, 4 hours, 18 minutes. Chen felt ice form in her stomach. The swarm had arrived 2 days early, while half the Villani population was still scattered across the planet in terrified flight from her own forces. All ships, battle stations, prep for orbital defense, and get me Colonel Rodriguez on the ground. On the planet's surface, Rodriguez was dealing with his own crisis. His soldiers had established secure perimeters around major population centers, but the Villani refused to approach them. Instead, millions of civilians were streaming away from the cities in panicked exodus, heading directly into wilderness areas that would be impossible to defend. Colonel, came Admiral Chen's voice over his comm. We have incoming Korath. ETA 4 hours. What's your status on civilian evacuation? Rodriguez looked at his tactical display showing the chaotic refugee streams flowing away from his positions. Admiral, we have a problem. The locals won't come near us. They think we're invaders. Current evacuation rate is effectively 0. Damn it. Can you make contact with their leadership? Dr. Silthera has been trying to coordinate from the capital, but her people aren't listening. They're running on pure instinct now, and their instinct is to get as far from us as possible. Chen closed her eyes. Humanity's first major rescue operation was turning into a catastrophe. The very people they had come to save were fleeing from them into the path of an enemy that would show no mercy. Dr. Silthara stood in the empty communication center of the Grand Spire, watching her world tear itself apart. The telepathic network was a storm of terror and confusion as her people fled in all directions. Some ran toward the poles, others into the deep forests. Many simply hid in caves and underground shelters. None were heading toward the evacuation ships that could save them. Doctor, called Veltar from the sensor station. We're detecting massive gravitational distortions at the system edge. Something big is coming. She turned to the displays and felt her heart stop. The sensor readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. Not ships, but living creatures the size of mountains, moving through space as easily as birds flew through air. The Korath, she whispered. The swarm had arrived. On the human flagship, Admiral Chen made the hardest decision of her career. All ships defensive formation Omega. Protect the planet at all costs. And patch me through to Dr. Silthara on all frequencies. The communication channel crackled to life, showing the Villani leader's crystalline features etched with despair. "Doctor," Chen said urgently, "the Korath are here. We have maybe 4 hours before they reach your world. We need to coordinate evacuation efforts immediately." "Admiral," Silthara replied, her voice breaking, "my people won't go near your soldiers. They're convinced you're here to harm us. I can't make them understand that you're trying to help." Chen stared at the alien leader, seeing her own failure reflected in those compound eyes. "Doctor, is there any way you can communicate directly with my forces? Some kind of telepathic contact?" I could try. But human minds are very different from ours. The contact would be painful for both sides." "Do it. We're running out of time." Silthara nodded and closed her eyes, extending her consciousness toward the human soldiers on the planet below. The contact was like touching fire. Alien thoughts burned with emotions and concepts she could barely comprehend. But through the pain, she sensed something that made her gasp in recognition. These humans weren't conquerors. They were protectors. Every tactical decision, every weapons deployment, every seemingly aggressive action, all of it was designed to shield her people from harm. The humans were terrified too, not of the Villani, but for them. They had come here to die if necessary, to save a species they had never met. "Colonel Rodriguez," she called over the open channel, her voice transformed by sudden understanding. "I can feel your intentions now. You came here to protect us." Rodriguez's voice crackled back from the surface. "That's right, Doctor. Every soldier down here volunteered for this mission. We're not leaving without your people. But my people are afraid. They don't understand what soldiers are for. We've never had protectors because we've never needed them." "Then help us show them. We need to get them to the evacuation ships before the Korath arrive." Silthara made her decision. "I'm coming down. Maybe if they see me working with your forces, they'll understand." She didn't wait for a response. Grabbing her personal communication equipment, she raced to the transport platform. As her crystalline form shimmered and dissolved into energy, she sent a desperate message through the telepathic network to every Villani on the planet. "The humans are not our enemies. They are our shields. Trust them as I trust them." She rematerialized in the center of Colonel Rodriguez's command post, her crystalline wings catching the light of human tactical displays. The soldiers around her started in surprise. None of them had ever seen a Villani up close. "Doctor," Rodriguez said, removing his helmet to show his face. "Thank you for coming. What do we need to do?" "Your soldiers. They look like machines of war. My people have never seen anything like them. But I can feel your minds now, through the psychic link. You're not machines. You're guardians." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That's exactly what we are. Every person in this unit chose to serve in the protection forces. We're here because someone needs to stand between innocent people and the darkness. Then show them. Let me help you show them." Together they began broadcasting a joint message to the scattered Villani population. Silthara spoke in their melodic telepathic language, while Rodriguez translated to practical terms. The message was simple. The humans had come to fight so the Villani could live. Slowly, tentatively, small groups of Villani began approaching the human positions. Rodriguez ordered his soldiers to remove their helmets, showing their faces. He had them set down their weapons and extend empty hands in gestures of peace. The first tentative contact between species occurred when a young Villani child, separated from its family in the panic, approached a human medic. The soldier, a veteran named Maria Santos, knelt down and gently guided the child toward a medical station, her movements careful and protective. The sight of the massive armored human cradling the delicate crystal being was broadcast across the telepathic network. For the first time since the humans had arrived, the psychic chatter shifted from terror to hope. But time was running out. The Korath bioships were accelerating through the outer system, their living hulls pulsing with predatory hunger. Long-range scans showed them deploying advanced scout forms, smaller creatures designed to assess planetary defenses. "Admiral," reported Commander Singh from the Fleet Tactical Center. "Korath scouts have entered the inner system. They're conducting reconnaissance sweeps of the planet." Chen watched the enemy formations with professional interest. The Korath moved like a living organism, with each ship fulfilling a specific biological function. The scouts were testing for resistance while the main force prepared for planetary consumption. "Defensive Plan Alpha," she ordered. "All ships engage scout elements. Keep them away from the planet until evacuation is complete." The first engagement began at the edge of the asteroid belt. Human destroyers intercepted Korath scout forms in brutal close combat, their plasma cannons carving through living tissue, while bioship weapons adapted to each attack pattern. The scouts were destroyed, but not before transmitting tactical data back to the main swarm. On the planet, evacuation finally began in earnest. Villani families approached human evacuation points, guided by their telepathic network and Dr. Silthera's constant reassurance. The humans worked with desperate efficiency, loading transport ships while their soldiers maintained protective perimeters. But Rodriguez could see the fear still present in every crystalline face. The Villani were cooperating, but they were terrified of their protectors. To them, the humans looked like living weapons, and in a sense, that was exactly what they were. "Doctor," he said to Silthera as another transport lifted off, "we're not going to get everyone off in time. There are too many people and not enough ships." She nodded grimly. "I know. The Korath will reach us before we can evacuate the outer settlements. Then we make a stand. My soldiers will hold the line while you get as many people off-world as possible." Silthara looked at the human colonel with new understanding. These beings had traveled across the galaxy to die for strangers. They were everything her peaceful people were not: violent, aggressive, and utterly ruthless in their protection of innocence. "Colonel," she said softly, "I think I finally understand what soldiers are for." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Yeah, Doctor. We're for when the talking stops working." The Korath swarm hit the outer defenses like a living storm. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Endeavor as her destroyers engaged the first wave of bioships, their plasma cannons carving brilliant lines through space. But for every Korath vessel destroyed, 2 more emerged from the darkness. "Tactical report," she ordered. "Enemy fleet composition is beyond our previous estimates." Commander Singh replied grimly. "We're looking at over 300 bioships, including at least 50 heavy assault forms. Our fleet is outnumbered 6-1. Chen studied the tactical display. The Korath weren't just attacking, they were adapting. Each destroyed bioship transmitted data to the swarm, allowing them to modify their tactics in real time. Already, the newer attacks were proving more effective against human weapons. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "Colonel Rodriguez is requesting orbital support for the evacuation sites." "Negative. We can't spare any ships from the orbital defense. Tell the colonel he's on his own down there." On the planet's surface, Rodriguez received the message with grim acceptance. His soldiers were spread thin across dozens of evacuation points, protecting streams of Villani refugees, while Korath scout forms began penetrating the atmosphere. "Sir," called Sergeant Martinez from the perimeter, "we've got incoming bioforms at grid reference 77 Alpha. Looks like atmospheric entry vehicles." Rodriguez activated his tactical display and saw them, dozens of smaller Korath creatures dropping toward the planet like living meteors. Each one was the size of a bus with adaptive bioarmor and weapons that shifted according to the threat they faced. "All units prepare for ground engagement. Remember, we're not trying to win this fight. We're buying time for the evacuation." The first Korath bioform landed 3 kilometers from the main evacuation site, its impact creating a crater in the Crystal Gardens. The creature immediately began adapting to the local environment, its flesh rippling as it analyzed atmospheric composition and terrain features. Private Johnson, a 20-year-old from New Texas, was the first human to see a Korath up close. The thing that emerged from the crater looked like a fusion of insect and nightmare, 6 meters tall, covered in armor that shifted color to match its surroundings, with weapon appendages that reconfigured themselves as he watched. "Contact," Johnson shouted into his comm. "Grid 77 Alpha, single bioform, hostile intent confirmed." The Korath creature turned toward him with terrifying speed. Its weapon appendages shifted into projectile launchers, firing bursts of organic acid that dissolved the crystal ground where Johnson had been standing. He rolled behind cover, his powered armor protecting him from the toxic residue. "This is Bravo, Squad," came Rodriguez's voice over the tactical network. "We're moving to assist. Hold position and keep it busy." Johnson popped up from cover and opened fire with his plasma rifle. The superheated energy bolt struck the Korath bioform center mass, burning through its adaptive armor. The creature screamed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with organic agony, and staggered backward. But instead of dying, it began to change. The damaged armor regrew, this time with a reflective coating that deflected plasma energy. The creature's weapon appendages shifted again, now firing concentrated beams of coherent light that could punch through human battle armor. "It's adapting to our weapons," Johnson reported as he dove for new cover. "Plasma fire is no longer effective." Rodriguez and his squad arrived at a dead run, their heavy weapons trained on the Korath bioform. "Switch to kinetic rounds," he ordered. "Bullets instead of beams." The squad opened fire with conventional projectile weapons, good old-fashioned lead bullets fired at hypersonic velocity. The Korath creature had adapted to energy weapons, but solid projectiles were a different challenge entirely. The bullets punched through its armor, creating wounds that couldn't be instantly sealed. The bioform staggered, green ichor bleeding from multiple impacts, but even as it fell, Rodriguez could see it was trying to adapt to this new threat as well. Its armor was already beginning to shift, developing layers designed to stop kinetic impacts. "Frag out," shouted Sergeant Martinez, lobbing a fragmentation grenade into the creature's center mass. The explosion sent shrapnel in all directions, finally putting the bioform down for good. But across the planet, dozens more were landing every minute. In orbit, Admiral Chen was fighting her own losing battle. The Korath bioships had adapted to human plasma weapons and were now advancing in coordinated waves. Their living hulls absorbed damage and redirected it into offensive systems, making them stronger with each hit they survived. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer, "we've lost the destroyers Wellington and Sarajevo. The enemy has breached the outer defensive perimeter." Chen made a decision that would have been considered insane by any other species in the galaxy. "All ships ramming speed. Target the largest bioships and prepare for reactor overload." Her officers stared at her in shock. "Admiral," Commander Singh said carefully, "that's suicide." "No, Commander. That's what it takes to stop something like this. The Korath adapt to whatever kills them, but they can't adapt to being completely destroyed." She keyed the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We're going to show these things why you don't mess with human space." The destroyer Yorktown was first to respond, accelerating directly toward a massive Korath bioship, while overloading its fusion reactor. Captain Torres transmitted his final message as his ship plowed into the enemy vessel. "For Earth and humanity, ramming speed." The explosion was visible from the planet's surface, a brief star that outshone the system's sun. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but the destruction of the bioship sent panic through the Korath formation. They had never encountered an enemy willing to die just to kill one of them. On the ground, Dr. Silthera watched the evacuation proceed with desperate efficiency. Her people were finally cooperating with the human soldiers, but there were still millions waiting for transport, and now the Korath ground forces were spreading across the planet like a plague. "Colonel," she said to Rodriguez, "there are too many of them. Even if your people destroy themselves fighting, there won't be enough time to evacuate everyone." Rodriguez nodded grimly. His soldiers were holding the line, but barely. Each Korath bioform required enormous firepower to kill, and they were adapting to human tactics with terrifying speed. Then he had an idea born from pure human stubbornness. "Doctor, your people have psychic abilities, right? Can you communicate with the Korath?" "I could try. But why would you want to talk to them?" "Because maybe we don't need to kill them all. Maybe we just need to make them think twice about messing with us." Silthera reached out with her telepathic abilities, touching the alien consciousness of the nearest Korath bioform. The contact was like plunging her mind into acid. The creature's thoughts were pure hunger and aggression, focused only on consumption and growth. But through the connection, she sensed something else. The Korath were a hive mind, but they were also living creatures capable of fear, and right now they were very confused by these humans who fought with suicidal determination. "I can feel their confusion," she reported. They've never encountered a species that fights like yours. They don't understand why you would sacrifice yourselves for strangers. Good. Rodriguez grinned. Let's give them something even more confusing to think about. He activated his tactical display and showed Silthara the human battle doctrine. Every strategy was based on the same principle. Humans would sacrifice everything to protect innocent life. They fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right of others to exist. Show them this, he said. Show them what happens to things that try to eat our friends. Silthara projected the images through her telepathic link to the Korath bioforms. The creatures saw human memories of countless battles fought against impossible odds. Wars won through sheer determination to protect others. They saw the destruction of their own bioships by humans willing to die just to save strangers. The effect was immediate. The Korath bioforms began hesitating in their attacks, their hive mind processing this new information. They had consumed thousands of species over millions of years, but none had ever fought like this. None had ever chosen death over letting others be harmed. In orbit, Admiral Chen was down to her last 3 ships when the Korath fleet suddenly stopped advancing. The bioships hung motionless in space, their weapon systems powered down. What are they doing? She asked. Commander Singh studied the sensor readings. It looks like they're retreating, Admiral. The entire swarm is pulling back from the planet. On the surface, the Korath bioforms were dissolving into organic slime, their consciousness withdrawn back to the fleet. Dr. Silthara maintained her psychic contact, feeling the alien intelligence grapple with what it had learned. They're afraid, she said in wonder. The Korath swarm is actually afraid. They've never encountered predators more dangerous than themselves. Rodriguez lowered his weapon and looked up at the stars where the human fleet still fought. Doc, we're not predators. We're guardians. There's a difference. What difference? Predators kill for themselves. Guardians kill for others. And sometimes that makes us scarier than anything in the universe.